Good morning. Today is, I don't know the date off the top of my head, but it's Wednesday, so that's kind of unusual. We are in Connecticut. It is, I can't say for certainty it's the first snow up here. We are far enough north of where I am that had it happened in my own neighborhood, it would have been the first, but up here they may have already had some. It is a cold, wet, 1 to 3 sleet-driven slushy snow, so your feet get wet and all that, but you also have a decent level of tracking possibility, so I guess that'll be a focus today. So my plans for the weekend, because we are in the extended Thanksgiving weekend, I will be out and about Friday and or Saturday, depending on weather. My original plan had been Vermont this morning, but luckily I checked their last night's forecast and they were looking at a wet and sloppy 4 to 8, which would make driving up there interesting and greatly limit the options of ingress. So as a result, we're down here. We'll look around, check tracks, and I guess follow up for the sake of giggles on the source of that pulsing sound if that wanted to make a reappearance. It only happened one time. I'm not going to expect to hear it ever again, but if I do, that will raise my ire to want to get to the bottom of that. Anyway, let's get going, see what we find. Today's a day of kind of whatever comes, because we're kind of off our game. We're not on the weekend. It's a weekday, so there's not a lot of people down here. And we'll kind of take things as they occur. Let's get going. We're back. We are at a familiar beaver pond. It's a day of less than perfect weather. I didn't know whether that's like a spelling bee thing. I didn't know whether the weather, because which one are you spelling? Was going to be still rainy. The rain has let up for a bit. I think it may be breaking up. So as a result, I didn't know how long I was going to be out here in a freezing rain, because let's face it, that sucks. There's something about a November rain, too, that's colder than the rest of the year, because it's either too cold in January to go out at all, or, yeah, it's raining, but big deal, whatever. Because right now, the temperature is probably middle 30s, but it's wet in the air, too, so that does make it chilly. And so that is going to influence this. This one is more of a look around. So far, I've seen deer tracks, but I mean, that's not hard to do in any area. We have plenty of deer in Connecticut. The more interesting tracks, although they may not have come into the area, they usually don't come into the neighborhood until later, probably a month or two from now, is there's a pack of coyote/coy dogs. It's a mixed pack from my encounter with them a couple of years ago. Not that I hike this area with any regularity to know that, but I haven't seen sign of them yet, so they may have moved on. They may have just not come into there. If they have like any kind of a pseudo-migratory route based on prey movements, which I would guess to be the case, I haven't seen that yet this year. Although they usually give themselves up by way of track, so we're only entering to that kind of weather now. We're actually moving out of the snow belt, as you can see, because we're under trees more. We didn't get a lot. We got like a dusting. They said 1 to 3, but during the course of the morning, at least further down south where I am, it turned to rain, so that could have washed away some of the resulting snow melt. There is still enough up here that clearly we got some, but this is a first run, or one of the first run. So we're going to make some observations of the greater neighborhood, because this is the same area that I was in last time, but not last week, because I was in Vermont last week, but I was here 2 weeks ago. And the one thing you have to notice and acknowledge, you change the weather, this place looks pretty different each time. It is unique that way. But, excuse me. What I'm going to talk about today is something I meant to talk about last week, but it slipped my mind because I had something else pop up. And it's a video last week where I sort of having a week of retrospect to kind of like play that back through my head. I wonder if I'm getting too much into somebody's personal business. I may not upload that one because of that. It's somebody that I have had dealings with over the years, and it's somebody who I express some fairly, I'll just say in finger quotes, I know it makes me sound like a dick when I say the following, ... I express some blunt opinions, but I may take the high road of I respect your privacy and I'll leave the video offline and probably get rid of it because it may be too much of an intrusion into your personal situation. And I haven't gone through what this person went through, but I will make the observation that my better half has. And I've seen the toll it can take. And I'm not going to kick somebody who's gone through that when they're down. So it sounds to me like in thinking out loud, I made that decision right there in front of you. So today we're going to talk about Bigfooting and Bigfootery as it results to groups. And I am using groups from personal experience. So this is all rhetoric and opinion. But my experience with groups, and I'm not just talking about Facebook groups. I'm talking about research groups actively out in the field. I'm talking about forums in that context. And the fact that you have a couple of philosophical camps in Bigfooting, and that results in the end in kind of a cultural wasteland. I have attempted a few that have attempted to bridge the gap between the opposing viewpoints of flesh and blood and the paranormal side of things through respectful discourse, but the unfortunate thing is it's a very delicate balance to have because you only need one bad apple who's not willing to be nice and the whole thing breaks down really quickly. As a result, what you have may not happen overnight each time, but I've seen this. I can cite more than a few examples. You have the development of an echo chamber where the group has their opinion and the leading voices in the group are the ambassadors of that opinion. And if you come in with an alternative opinion, some do it faster than others, but you are declared a heretic to the cause and you are shown the door. I'll pause for a minute because I thought I just heard something. And when I do this, bear in mind, I'm not just doing this because of like Bigfoot, but because of like hunting. I want to know what's in the area too. There's a mixed bag. If I don't declare it actually de facto, I do actually tend to multitask while I'm out here a little bit mentally. I will make a completely irrelevant comment to our current topic that I have yet to decide whether or not I'm going to bother going through the grief of getting a bow hunting license down here next year. Not so much because of the ordeal itself, but because my favorite bird of hunting is grouse. And despite the claim we have them here, you notice I'm out here a lot. I have never seen a single friggin' one. In Vermont, despite this year and the flooding, they are plentiful and common. Not the same down here. So far only seeing deer tracks, but that's a common thing, so. What I'm surprised in this area I don't see more of are deer hunters, because you're getting to that desperation time of deer season when they want the trophy buck, and time is clicking between now and Christmas time when they run out of time. So when you get to the end, if I go out and I'm local at the weekend, you may see more of them. But getting back to our topic, that unfortunately has been the trend I've seen. And when I say over time, I mean 2004 to the present. So we're talking 2 decades of Bigfootery evolution, guys. You have the blogs. The blogs are out there. That's kind of the way somebody finds a middle ground, I suppose, where they can. So for the longest running blog platform that requires minimal effort of knowing anything technical, you would go the route of Blogger with Google. And they, like any other, have the mechanism to turn comments on or off. If you turn them on, you can interact with people and they can disagree with you if you are that patient with them, or you can just give your thoughts and they read it or they don't based on whether they want to or not. As I'm going to make a diversionary comment and then come back to the group evolution, de-evolution topic, but there seems, and this is more of an IT comment, to be, and we see it right now in Twitter, because I'm not going to call it X, fuck you, it's Twitter. Elon Musk seems singly determined to destroy Twitter as a platform, and made just this week a interestingly comical lawsuit against people who are advertisers who are leaving the platform. Because apparently you don't have the right to free will to do that. Let us just say that I will wish him luck with that, because it's completely unenforceable and shows him to be somebody who I do strongly believe has Asperger's syndrome and has no fucking touch with reality. And since he has the money that he does, and probably the nerdly mindset that he does, probably even more so, out of touch with reality. And if you sign on to go to Mars with him, you are going to die. If you care about that kind of thing, just to put that out there. Facebook is not quite to that point of de-evolution yet. And never say never, because at one point you had MySpace. Where are they now? You had groups and forums on AOL. Where are they now? And like platforms. You had Google Plus. Google Plus didn't catch on, so it's gone. Tumblr. Who uses Tumblr? I don't. I had an account at one point. Every now and then I get a notification from them. I never used it because I, like many others, went out to check out a platform, see what it was about. Found out it did nothing for me. And much to my surprise, I finally got my invite code for Blue Sky Social, and I have plugged into that. I'm currently going through that process with them, and so far, my comment with them would be, as an observation, it seems to be basically what Twitter once was. Which was not completely useless if you have a valid use case for using it. For myself, it was like just getting quick news bursts of information from local news, state police, weather advisories, this kind of thing. And for that, it wasn't completely useless. It has, under the jackass Musk, if you like him, fuck you, you're an idiot. That's the one time you'll hear a pseudo-political opinion out of me in this rant. But he has ruined Twitter. Okay, these are potentially deer tracks, but the other thing, yeah, they are, because that one defines as one. But you notice in this wet snow, definition tends to suck, so you have to use your best judgment. Surprised you don't have anything tracking them yet in the way of a predator, but anyway. I'm also surprised you don't have more bear activity here, because You don't have a lot of human activity in here. I mean, there are times when I've run into hunters here, but not with as much frequency as you would think, considering there is kind of like a trail I'm following now. I stand corrected. Anyone home? Everything I just said about not seeing anyone here, I retract, because here we go. And I will say he has good placement of his blind. I didn't notice that till I was right on top of it. I'm going to check just to make sure he's not hearing me yap, but there doesn't seem to be anyone home. Nope, nobody home. But notice when you run into somebody else's things out here, you respect the fact that they are other people's things. And you don't touch. You just kind of like peek and see what they did. Every now and then you'll run into something as a fellow hunter where they did something interesting that you hadn't thought of. That's pretty basic though. Anyway, I could go platform by platform. Some have popped up and proven interesting. I think, though, there have been certain meltdowns this year with some that have shown the weakness of the social media concept. Reddit's another one where they started having a censorship thing due to, I forget exactly what the cause was, but they started having people just taking their subreddits completely private and killing discourse as a result, or basically starting to post completely TOS breaking stuff just as an act of rebellion. And the management of the platform started arbitrarily ripping out moderators and replacing them with quote-unquote loyal ones, which is, needless to say, a wee bit tyrannical. YouTube has had its hiccups. Not that I'm a live streamer, but Twitch is a shit show I won't touch with a fucking 20-foot pole and things like this. Although I think that's a completely different venue from what I'm approaching. What I am driving at is there's a model that's coming forward where you basically self-publish. I forget, I think it's called Moss or something, but you self-publish and then you syndicate everywhere. So there's a guy who left, I forget where he was, but he left something and he moved towards Substack, and he has like a newsletter. And he sends it out by email, and then he syndicates it to the far points of the world. And there's like 40 different ways to get his thoughts on shit. That seems to be where things are going, because you have the Fediverse coming. It hasn't fully evolved into a usable model yet, but things like Mastodon and Lemmy and new platforms that are operating on the federated model. and PeerTube, which is a same version. All the current major platforms have an equivalent on the Fediverse that are not quite there yet. But they're moving more towards a more random Wild West internet style that was around. And I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but it seems that the platform thing is, if you're familiar with the term, reaching a peak oil moment. And change is not here yet, but it is coming. So there are those out there who will violently resist Elon Musk or others. I didn't say that. Anyway, it'll be interesting to see how that affects the evolution of Bigfootery and how things apply to that, because the de-evolution of that has been one like-minded group will take over the group, and anyone with a devolving group will get disgusted, and after they've been thrown out a couple dozen times from a place because they don't see the light. The extreme example of this would be the Matt Johnson cult of Zorth. You either agree with Matt Johnson or you don't, and if you do, you're probably in need of a mental health checkup because he is about as far out there as anyone in Bigfooting is going to be. You have, on a more not so batshit level, but still bordering on batshit, the believers from the Bigfoot Believer group on Facebook is an example of the polar opposite of the Coalition for Critical Thinking, which was a cult-esque echo chamber in their own right, but on the opposing direction, masquerading as agnostics and skeptics, but are actually just scoffing at everything there and mocking people that don't agree with them like everyone else. Each one of these groups, not all of them, but I'll use the Zorth example and the Coalition, are led by people who have, at the very least, a questionable take on these things, if not greater reality on some level. And they're self-appointed enablers. It's interesting now how visible that is when you're out here looking this way. Just an observation. I'm kind of walking in circles because I'm looking for tracks. So here you have spray. If you look and see that close enough. Around one tree, which normally I don't rule out as bobcat. Although I've seen tracks, I've seen them on trail cam. I've never seen one up close and personal out in the wild. I see them actually, ironically, more in the suburbs than I do out here. Because they wander there, and with development in Connecticut being where it is in central Connecticut, you actually have that being an increasing occurrence. They are adapting and all that. It's the evolution of things, not for the better, but it is. But each one kind of has its own state of evolution. So on Facebook, this is kind of like the place where things like this exploded, because you can have your little echo chamber and somebody who's disaffected and got all offended that you threw them out because they don't agree with your take on the subject. They click a create button, guess what? They've got a group too. Now they're doing exactly the same thing echo chamber wise. Only people that want to see things their way will ultimately survive. I've got a couple of groups that are basically meant to be research-oriented, field-oriented, and for the most part, I probably have some guilt in this to a degree. I have a hard and fast low patience for people that are solely there to spam something, spam their bullshit, or otherwise be disruptive. And in that case, I will remove you. And I have. There was a gentleman a couple of years ago who was militantly standing by the notion Bigfoot's an alien because that's the only possibility. And I'm like, okay, I tolerated him at first, but he became combative because other people were not. I tried to do the agree to disagree thing, but he wasn't going to have that. I'm right, you're wrong, and he just isn't going to have it. So I removed him. It is what it is. Recently, there was a gentleman who's trying to go the Steve Isdall route of being a quote-unquote Bigfoot guide, and he's charging people all this money. And if it smells like fish and it looks like fish and it's got scales on it and can breathe underwater, it's fishy. So I'm not having that either, just as two examples. But going back to the forum days, you had the Bigfoot forums. They're still out there. There it was more a matter of kissing the cool kids' ass in the way of the moderators. And if you have 20,000 posts on there because you're there every day and literally have no life, that's what makes you unassailable there. The entrenched, they call them. And there are people there today that probably have 20,000 plus posts because they've been there for years. Literally years, every day. Claiming to be big game hunters and have a story for every time they're out there. And there was a guy doing this a long time ago called Long Tapper. It turns out he was nothing but an egg farmer. Had a story and an opinion on everything, but he's a friggin' egg farmer. Go figure. The classic example of building up a persona in a given receptive audience and then playing on that character for years. That's been going on since the 90s. Mark Zahn, a.k.a. Liberator from the Usenet days. There you had a very interesting person who was a troll that probably had the most developed persona I've ever seen, pretty much ever. with a backstory that had so much detail. He ought to just like write a book about the guy that he's portraying himself as. It really was an interesting state of somebody struggling to be homeless, struggling with his past, and basically struggling with mental. The character he portrayed was actually quite fascinating, and he got a following, believe it or not. Interesting stuff that back then. And since Usenet was basically the only thing back then, he pretty much had a captive audience. So it goes back that far. I'm only going to go back as far as forums. But then, once upon a time, you had the Eric Beckyard forum for the ambassadors of guano. Figure out what I mean. And you had the Bigfoot forum. And you had the Blue Forum of the BFRO, because Matt Moneymaker, of course, is the only scientific person back then pursuing Bigfoot, which is a load. He's an aspiring TV star now, and he's pretty much abandoned the BFRO if you believe certain rumors. Little gossip intertwined with the devolution. I'm just going to call it devolution. It's probably de-evolution. Let's just call it devolution. It's easier. Social media Bigfootery, because I could go case by case with the creation of every group, but it basically follows that pattern of you got thrown out of Group A because you have an alternative opinion. You're not going to have it because your word must be spread, and you just hit the create group button on Facebook, and hey, look, you got one too. And for the first 3 months of that group, all you're going to do is rag on the group that threw you out, because that's just how you do things, because sour grapes. And we've probably all done it at one point or another, because they got needlessly nasty about it. And I say this as someone, I'm trying to be relatively non-specific and non-biased towards any one particular one, because they all do it. But as far as the research groups go, this is no different. These are people you've met in real life, gone out in the field with, been around the campfire with, spent real time and real life experience with. They're no different. I have been a member of NESRA, the Northeastern Sasquatch Research Association, the SRI, the Bigfoot Research Initiative, both iterations, although one was more brief than the other, of the American Bigfoot Society, as well as the Alliance of Independent Bigfoot Researchers. So at one point, what's that, 4 or 5 groups? I disagreed with somebody, just to cite how these things can happen. And this is in real life. Each one of these is a real life example. A different party saw something that a person did that was admittedly probably nothing more than a boneheaded prank, but they called it a hoax. In principle, I agreed with them. The popularity Bigfootery contest that things can be reared its head. The other person remained. I was the one who was scapegoated and removed, and yes, that sounds like a personal vendetta. Nope, just an observation. The group wasn't really going anywhere anyway. My bigger grievance is they were trying to upgrade their website at one point, and myself and another woman and a woman were trying to upgrade their website. And we had a working backbone of one going, and then all of a sudden one day we found out that one person made a decision to go a completely different direction and not tell anyone and wasted our time. That's the bigger grievance. And to this day, I don't appreciate that. Don't invoke my help if you don't want it. Because the SRI of all these groups, probably seen by the greater community as the Jimites, what the fuck were they before? They became the Michigan Recording Project, but they probably were people I probably on a forum basis were more hostile with. But of all the groups I was in, I actually can't claim that they ever actually screwed me over on any conscious level, because they didn't. We just disagreed on a lot of stuff. It was a simple matter of honest disagreement. and the lack of ability to agree to disagree, largely due to ego on both sides. I'll freely admit that. But there came a time when they asked for help on their website. I did offer, I went through what I call my gullible period. And they ultimately said, hey, we don't need your help. We're good. I can't claim that they screwed me because of that moment alone. They were the one person, in their own blunt honesty, they actually admitted that they had come to a different way of doing it, and that was fine. The ABS, the first one, the guy basically just closed shop because he had a kid and decided family life was going to be where he focused, and that I have no animosity towards. But it suddenly was reinvigorated by other parties. I'm not going to go into that whole mess, but whether they did this with the blessing of the first person or not is something you'll never know. I would not trust the version of events given by the person who took it over, because they've been caught in more brazen lies than I can begin to go into. But all of a sudden, myself and a couple of other people that were in the first one were members again. We didn't get asked. We were just members again. We were getting berated because we weren't in there. Here you go. Weekly mandatory meetings. They had a weekly chat on Wednesdays, and you absolutely had to be there for reasons that nobody really ever understood. Because Bigfoot. But I quit that one. Later laughed at the announcement I had been thrown out. And then got a wall of silence when I posted the email receiving from the same very party wishing me for the best of luck in my future endeavors, and we acknowledge and we regret your resignation. But I had emails saying that I threw it out there just basically to be an asshole. But that's how that usually works. And I'll give the polite version of what happened with Nezra, where we basically just developed to a point where we had, for lack of a better term, artistic differences. You know, we parted ways. But it was a coming to a head of philosophical differences, and that's where things break down, and that's the whole point I drive at. It happens on Facebook. It can probably happen on YouTube. It can happen on any platform where you have a group identity of any kind. Currently, Facebook would probably be the chronic example, but there are others. You have the forums, and on Bigfoot forums, to this present day, more moose tracks and stuff, or deer tracks. To this present day, the Bigfoot forums, the entrenched rule, and if you don't kiss their ass, you won't be there long. But then again, other discussion forums of different subjects have gone through this too. There's a couple of martial arts forums I've been on for 3 minutes, and my literal crime was just not posting something immediately. Because I joined during lunch at work and then went off to do this thing called work. Came back and found out I had been banned. In my heresy, I actually had the audacity to ask why. Somewhere way in the back, at the bottom, in the fine print of their TOS, which reads like any software license agreement, which is basically your firstborn, your arm, your leg of opposing corners, and your dog from 5 years ago after you resurrected its corpse after it got hit by a car, and things of this nature, to promise to them for eternity just cause. And you have to write basically an essay on what martial arts you do and what got you started. Give a little bit of your life story, because they just feel they have a right to it. And you have to do that in the first 15 minutes of signing up. Seems a little extreme to me, but because I didn't do that, I got removed from the fold. And I'm like, I even tried to be diplomatic and say, I'm citing this one in detail because it's kind of an extreme example of this kind of nonsense. Ultimately, these kind of groups end up being ruled by one ego. for lack of a better way of putting it, one ego. And these egos are almost always toxic in some way. And this is one example. And the guy was met with my argument of, yeah, but I was at work and I didn't really have the time to do it. And maybe your method for doing this is a little demandingly extreme. And this was in response to, well, this is the rule, you clearly didn't read it, and your reason better be good. I can almost guarantee you that this person, without getting into other philosophical matter, was a cop. Because I didn't respect his authority. Quoting Eric Cartman, South Park. And that's exactly the mentality, the mindset you are running into. And it's an extreme example of why forums have real limitations if you take them too seriously, and way too many people do. What's my message from that particular standpoint? People, it's a fucking website. How much of your day does it realistically freaking take up? Be honest. There, you have it. You want to give your honest opinion and get a following, or just put your words out there, start a blog or a podcast, or do something like I'm doing right now. If there's nothing going on, I mean, this is an interesting area. I take you out where I go. Is this suitable habitat for inhabitation? Yes. Yes, it is. Let me take you on a tour. Start walking across a pond over that way and proceed for the next 4 miles. In Connecticut, yes. You know what you're going to hit? More woods. Yonder. Into Massachusetts you go. But you know what? For the next 4 miles, nothing but woods. You go this way. Maybe 2.5, 3 miles. Till you hit the little two-lane rural highway you're on. More woods. Dead end little cul-de-sac through a lot of the same I just described, but in all fairness, more woods, but you do have a road there. You got to get in here somehow. And if you go that way, take what you saw over there, apply it over there. If you go in that direction, same thing. Connecticut does have its own limited form of moose country, and you are walking into it right now. And I bring you out here to share my thoughts on life and Bigfoot and other stuff. And that is one example of a way to do what I'm getting to. And I kind of jump around the point a lot, but that's what I'm saying. Sorry for the bumpy camera. I'm used to the other one that was the gimbal camera that had stabilization. And this is as much a microphone as, hey, look what I'm looking at. But I think ultimately, if you are hell-bent on having your opinion and sticking to your guns, that's what you kind of have to do. Because when you go into a forum, you're going to run afoul of somebody who doesn't agree with you. And I'm not going to go down a philosophical rant that's going to start a different argument. But you basically, in the one with this martial arts group, just to wrap up a story time there for you, he started off, we have this rule and you didn't do it, it better be good. I was at work and I didn't have the time. I figured I would have enough flexibility to come back to it later. The band stood. Yeah, apparently a personally reasonable argument, not good enough. Because the reason I'm going to throw out one, this I guess is a political opinion. If you are somebody with a badge, get over it. It's how I feel about it. And old school cops, I differentiate from new school cops because new school cops do not have the training the old school cops had. You can disagree with me. Fuck you, you're wrong. And that is this. They have this kind of obey or die, us or them mentality because of the certain war on certain things, which is radically becoming more obsolete as things like weed become increasingly legalized. And I myself, as a person who has never smoked in my life, don't personally agree with the legalization process, but it is there. It is coming, and a lot of their revenue, a lot of their justification for questionable stops and things is drying up. They can't go, I smell weed. It must be like we may be out of juice. So subscribe the videos about the end due to lack of juice.